Hey, Colin, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Really appreciate you giving your time.
No, no dramas, mate. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we usually kick off with the question around family. So tell us about your family.
So, one of four. My parents, Kim and Trevor. Um, yeah,
Fair.
born in Trevi, born in Brizzy, and raised here my whole life. Yeah, so I'm the youngest of four. Lucky enough that I've actually got my sister Holly working in our business, which I'm sure we'll chat about a little bit later.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, grew up just normal average Aussie kid. Spent a lot of time outdoors and yeah, had a heap of fun playing sport and growing up together. So
Mm. Oh, awesome. And I think you've got how old's Jude now?
Jude's he's almost two in Jan. So yeah, got obviously beautiful wife Simone, who is co-founder of me within the business. And yeah, Jude's two in Jan. So time's flown. Crazy to say, actually. So
Yeah, no, really cool. And how do you guys spend like weekends, or what do you love doing together to sort of chill out and relax?
yeah, it can be difficult, right? Because running a business, both working within the business,
Mm.
you've that you've got to find some time for that off switch. So for us, it's like to spend it at the beach, going camping. Obviously, COVID maybe's made that a little bit more difficult, but for us, it's spending time outdoors, going for a walk, spending time with Jude, spending time with our two dogs, which are Italian greyhounds. Which funny story into it, but that's sort of how we came up with the name Arch.
No.
So yeah, we very outdoorsy people, just love getting the sun in, getting all the elements of the world. So
Yep. How good. There you go. And so do you have any rhythms in place with Simone? For instance, like you mentioned, you work together, which I guess would be cool, but it also have its challenges.
yeah.
Do you have anything in place that help get get the best out of that?
Uh Good question. Look, we try to make sure that it's such a hard thing especially in a growing business, to try and make sure that we separate from work and family life. But often it's leaving home, going to do something, seeing family. I mean, we're super fortunate in the sense that Simone grew up in Boona, which is just west of Ipswich.
Yeah.
So, we go out quite often. Her family is still out there. Usually, when we're going to do a family trip, it's a full day event, if not a couple of days. Bit of drinking involved and having a bit of fun. And
Awesome.
but getting away from that normal environment of the office, and just, I guess, taking in something a little bit different, spending it with family. And I wouldn't say we've got a set rhythm, but it's making sure that we're just, I guess, enjoying that time together.
Yeah.
Um,
On
Not
a
working, not on emails, all that sort of stuff, which you can get stuck in the habit of doing. So,
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like maybe there's no rhythm, but there's definitely the intention there.
of
So
course, of course, I know that for us, it's especially from like a work point of view, that you feel so much better going into the work week when you do get that separation of like going and doing something fun. Whereas, and I must admit, this has happened plenty of times, working on a Saturday, working on a Sunday, not necessarily full days, but then you get to Monday and you're almost a little bit more tired than maybe what you would be if you had that rest, and you're a little bit more energized. So
yep.
yeah, separation's massive for us.
Fantastic. And I think we'll touch on the your business soon, but I'd love to know what your career looked like up until just before starting Arch, because I think that's kind of cool
Yeah,
background.
yeah, and it's a funny story, right? Because the whole thing's a bit of a funny story because it was sort of, I fell into finance by accident. So
How do you do that?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, good. I'm going to go through that real quick.
Yeah.
So, I left school, finished schoolies, and my parents said to me, "Cole, like you got to get a job right away." So they actually gave me a job working for them. So they owned a paint and furnishing company,
Oh,
like distributing to, I guess panel beaters and cabinet makers and all sorts of fields. So they gave me a job pretty much fresh out of school. I think I was on about $300 a week. And I thought
bad.
that was amazing. Being 17, almost turning 18, like you go and spend that down at your local. Not all of it, obviously, but a good portion of it. Maybe not before you're 18, actually, but anyway.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, that's right. So and then so my sister was married to a guy, and it was actually his brother that called me one day whenever I was working for them and says, "Hey, how would you like to work for the bank?" And I was like, yeah, why not? Like, so he was working for Bank West at the time, and he said, "Mate, I've got you an interview. Go in." I remember it was on a Friday. So I went in there, had an interview as Bank West in Brisbane CBD. So at this point in time, there was only one of them around.
Yeah.
So I went in, bombed the interview, thinking this is a kid that's probably had his real first professional interview. I think I was actually 18 at the time.
Yeah. Wow.
Interview, bombed it, thought, okay, there's no way I'm going to get it. So end up finding this story out later, but they had actually hired for 2 teller jobs at Bank West. And just as training had completed for them, one of them actually decided, this isn't for me, no notice, and left. So bombed the interview, got a call the Friday afternoon and said, "You've got the job." And I was thinking to myself, oh, okay, mustn't have done as bad as I thought. And the funny story is the person who was working there wasn't the boss, but was quite high up. She told me the story many years later, who I'm still in touch with.
Wow.
And she said, "Yeah, no, you did bomb that interview. You did terrible, but we urgently needed someone." And this
Wow.
person, the brother-in-law at the time, had vouched for you and said, "Mate, really good bloke. Yeah, he'll do really well." Off the back of that, so I rocked into work on the Monday. I played footy on the Sunday and played out at Pine Rivers and actually broke my nose.
Oh,
So I rocked into work on Monday with 2 massive black eyes and a busted nose. And I could tell they were looking at me like, what have we got ourselves into? So it wasn't a fight or anything like that. But yeah, first day, quite the impression. So yeah, I pretty much started out as a teller for Bank West. And just worked my way up, and I worked my way up quite quickly. So I was doing personal loans and credit cards, and then I was doing home loans, and then I was an assistant manager, all within a space of probably about 3 years. So it all moved quite quickly. But these were valuable things I was picking up through, working in those different positions within the bank, because it allowed me to get an understanding of, what goes on from, start to finish. So I spent some time at Bank West, and then I actually went and worked for my folks again for a little bit as a stopgap, just because, I was 23 or 24, an assistant manager at the bank. There's a lot of expectation that came with that. And I was just in those early years of partying and having fun and, just being a kid, really. So worked there for a little bit, and then they decided to sell. So I transitioned back into finance, worked for BOQ for some time, and then I moved on to Westpac, which was probably not the best decision I'd made, but very close.
Yep.
Because it allowed me to undertake new roles again within the bank. I moved over as a finance manager, and then I moved my way into business development, which was looking after loads of aggregators, which are licensees for mortgage brokers, and dealing with mortgage brokers and getting an understanding of their businesses and how they operated. So for me, seeing that, I just started to learn more and more and more, and allowed me to gain an understanding of maybe what my business would look like if I ever decided to make the move. So it was, a journey 10, 11 years in the making. And I know there's always that thought of, well, maybe I should have done it a little bit sooner. But for me, I wouldn't change anything about it, because I was able to understand all these different things, which then apply to me today, which allow me to help my clients. It's not just a home loan. We know a lot of the process that go into places with setting up accounts, what sometimes all the silly bank things that pop up. So I guess we've also got a bit of an understanding of why the bank requires things sometimes, which allows us to explain the journey a little bit more to our clients. So that was really it. That was probably summarized very quickly for a 10 or 11 year period, but that's sort of how it played out.
Yeah, there you go. And I like that, I guess, towards the end of your career there, having that, view straight into other mortgage broking businesses, and you can kind of see the better performing ones. And like, I think BDMs usually sort of take out the brokers for a coffee or a lunch or something. Did you get to spend some time with those sort of high performing ones?
Yeah, I definitely did. And I've got good relationships with a couple of them still. I think one of the things that I've really learned about myself definitely has been the fact that, willing to ask the question, never being too good. You're always going to learn something from somebody. So for me, I constantly stay in touch with people. You're getting feedback about, what they're doing well, because unless maybe you're Google or Amazon or Facebook, there's always probably going to be someone out there that's just a little bit better than you. So, you're always just trying to learn and take feedback and trying to better, what you're trying to create, really.
Yeah, no, very good. And I guess from hindsight, it might have made a lot more sense than sort of when you're at Westpac. But how did you go with the decision to leave Westpac and set up? Like, what was going on in your mind? And yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was a fun one. A few sleepless nights. I'd never admit that to Simone, so hopefully she doesn't watch this. But okay. Yeah. For our family, I've always sort of been the bit more of a risk taker. Simone's probably a little bit more closed off and reserved, which makes us a really good balance, I think. But for me, it was just about taking that risk. I was able to gain an understanding of, what mortgage brokers get paid, how it all works, the commission side of things, which is something you're sort of, I guess, held back from whenever you're in the bank, and maybe you're a home finance manager or a lending manager. So you don't directly think about what your figures correlate to whenever you're writing the business. You're more worried about, okay, how do I get bonus? What does that look like? And so from stepping from actually writing the loans to then, gaining an understanding of how it all works, from a monetary sense, I thought that it was something that I could definitely make a good go at. And it always sort of been burning inside me to potentially start a business, because, that's the foundation of what my parents did. They took the risk. So I'd seen it. Well, not necessarily seen it, because I was obviously too young at that point in time, but, they made the step, and I saw the rewards that they gained from that. They retired at 60, or actually it might have been a touch before their 60th birthdays, and self-funded retirees. So, and not having to work again. So, they've done an amazing job. And really, for me, that's what I strive to be, almost, is what my parents were able to do. So I knew that I needed to necessarily stop working for the man at some point in time, and have a go at it. And I just thought that it was the perfect opportunity to do it. So a few sleepless nights, but I wouldn't have been able to probably make the jump if I didn't have Sim there as well, because she reassured me and just told me, keep going, you can do this. Keep believing in yourself, because you've been blabbering on about it for the last 12 months that you're going to do it, and that you can do it. So,
Yeah.
I was lucky that I had that support system there, and my parents as well. I've spoke endlessly with them about different pieces of the business and what we should do and what did they do at this point in time. And that is the best decision that I've made from from, I guess, a career point of view, was just making the jump. And there was a lot of time in there we spent learning and figuring out what was going to be the best. And that's the culmination of those 10 or 11 years, is to now where we're at. So
Yeah, wonderful. There you go. So, so you're, I guess, day one, or first couple of weeks into Arch, like, and I think, like, from watching your business grow, it's been like amazing to see what you've done in 2 relatively short years. But
yeah.
Walk us through the journey, like some of the sort of key high points and key low points of running Arch.
Yeah. So it was always one of those things, because, whenever you're working for the bank, you're fortunate in that you have that brand, right? Which is what people are often driven to, people walking in. And I definitely developed a lot of strong relationships, people that have followed me along the way from whatever bank I was working for over to Arch. So, those first few weeks, it was sort of like, yeah, hopefully people are going to remember you. But what I actually found was, whenever I started the business, I actually had more people, more family and friends contacting me, because I wasn't, set to one bank or one lender. All of a sudden it was like, well, no, we want to support Colin. So for me, that was a real tick of approval of, like, okay, well, we can do this. And it's certainly the first thing that I remember is within mortgage broking, and this Benny of how we're paid. But that first commission hit for the first time, seeing that come in, and just like, okay, yeah, the money's going to be there. We can keep pushing on. That's always was always nice, because that's the first money you made as a business owner. So, you've obviously delivered on what you've provided your clients. So, but the relationship with you guys has continued to blossom, and we're obviously very fortunate to have that relationship. And I know that you've helped us out a ton as well. But yeah, the high points were, so whenever I first started the business, it was just me.
Yep.
And then it must have been probably a few months after everything had started. So I went through the setup, which was probably the hardest bit, is trying to get everything set up. What platforms do we need to use? Not everything goes smoothly in trying to get everything set up, would you believe? But then Sim came in. So Sim was working for Westpac like me. That's actually how we met. But she was working for Westpac like me. And she was working for the BT side of the business, which is like the superannuation and working with the advisors. And she was actually part of the redundancy, because the Westpac sold the business off. So Sim sort of came out, and then when she came on board, everything just started to take shape a little bit more for us. It can be a bit lonely when you're by yourself, trying to think of ideas, trying to run stuff by someone. So whenever Sim came over, everything sort of just started to make a little bit more sense. So we had that. And then we were lucky enough to be nominated for Newcomer of the Year, which was obviously super special. Once again, it's just like wasn't about the award. It's the recognition that, hey, we must be doing something right here.
Yeah.
So that, and then just bringing Holly on board as well, which happened at the start of this year, which is my sister, which I sort of alluded to at the start. The pride in being able to do that, to be able to provide someone with an income and offer them a job, especially a family member, was a super special moment. And once again, just showing that we're going in the right direction, that we're growing, and not necessarily worrying about, where you're necessarily spending the dollars in a sense. It's just like, okay, we can continue to grow here, and we've got the ability to do that, and we've got the work to do it as well. So those things, they've been the highlights for me. And just the clients that we've helped. Yep. We've helped, hundreds of clients in that 2-year period. And for me, I do wear my heart on my sleeve a lot of the time. So I am the one like fist pumping when the approvals come through. And it's not from like the monetary sense in any way. Like, yes, that's the added bonus of doing what I do, but it's the journey, because you do go on a journey with these people. It's the start of getting to meet someone and gaining an understanding, I guess, like we're doing here, like gaining an understanding of where they've come from, what jobs have they had, what's their family, have they been in Brisbane forever or New South Wales or wherever they might be, and then to go through that process of like apply for finance, or, it might be a strategy of like, this is where we need to be in order to buy a property. There's people, I had someone the other day, we were talking to them probably a couple of weeks after we started the business, and I literally got finance approved for them this morning.
Wow. So you got to over time. It
was just like, it can be a process. Doesn't necessarily mean that, we need to talk and you need to find a property straight away. It's about putting that, that strategy in place. So for me, it's all the people that we've helped. And that one this morning was super special for the journey we've been on. I was fist pumping and screaming, and I called the client. We were doing the same thing together.
Yeah.
So, it's those special moments. There's so many of them that we've had.
And you've done some magic tricks. I know from personal experience. It's been good when those approvals come through.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Awesome. And I guess another question I've got, like, what's sort of been one or two of the tougher moments? And I think one of them you kind of hinted on before, like working the weekends aren't fantastic, but and your business has grown like I think you've in dog years we often refer to here at Inspire, but you have definitely, like, there's brokers who don't even get to what you've done in a year. Like, it's just insane. So but that's not going to come without some crappier stuff happening. But did you want to sort of share some of the that stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I think for us, that's probably been the biggest thing is, the long nights, and, we've shared text messages at all sorts of hours, not drinking, surprisingly, or maybe a beer here or there, but working, you know what I mean? So for me, it has been that, like my dad always said to me, he's like, at the start, you've just got to run. And you've got to run as hard as you can, and you've just got to go as hard as you can. And then the rest, then you can start to build later on. And that's what it was like at the start.
Yeah.
It was just hell for leather, 100 miles an hour, getting out there as much as possible, getting back to clients at all sorts of hours. So at the start, and because it's so, like, at the start, because it was just me and Sim, chuck a baby in there as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about. For us, it was just like, you do need that time away, which is sort of what we were talking about earlier with the rhythm, is just, and you actually have a positive effect from that. In just quality of your work and the time that you spend working. But, the first couple of years has just been hell for leather, just going as hard as possible. And now we're in the position where we are going to grow. We're lucky to bring Holly on at the start of the year. There's a plan for another mortgage broker coming on in Jan, Feb next year, which is then going to present more opportunity for us to grow even further. So, the challenging things probably really have been the work that's had to go into it. But would I necessarily change anything? No, I wouldn't. But that's come with a little bit of COVID as well. So, but that separation's obviously key from the business at any point in time. So,
yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Jude in there. How did you go, or maybe another way to say that is, how did you cope?
Yeah, well, so for anyone that knows me and Sim, we don't like to do anything in halves. We're like pedal to the metal. Just I don't know what it is about us. It's just whatever we do it in droves. So probably long story, but whenever we were getting married, we actually decided it was going to be a good idea to sell our house and then buy another property.
Mm-hmm.
Same day settlement. Anyway, for anyone out there that's done one before, it can be a little bit manic, but we did it. It was 2 weeks before our wedding. We decided, you know what, we're going to buy a new home. And as a process of doing that, we decided to sell the existing one. And everyone always makes fun about it, but same thing with the business. So we started the business on the 1st of October, 2019.
Yeah,
I think.
wow.
What are we in? 21. Yeah, so it's been 2 years. And then Jude came along in Jan 2020. So, and so glad that we did it when we did it, in a sense, because we were lucky that business early on, yes, there was a lot involved with it, but it also allowed the flexibility for me to be able to see that early time with Jude and spend that early time with him as well. But for us, it just came down to operating rhythm. So, and once again, we'll keep harping on about Sim, but she did such an amazing job in raising him, only though he's only 2, but she's done such an amazing job in all those little bits and pieces to enable us, I won't say me, us to grow the business. So, it's allowed us to just be doing as well as we are. But for Sim, anyone that knows her knows she has a ridiculous work ethic, and that just comes from her family, which if you ever get to meet them, they're just honestly work. So her father, Darren, he works at the hospital. He does some security work there, but he worked at Churchill Abattoir for a very long time, but then also has a farm. So would spend the weekends, running cattle and doing all that sort of stuff. And my dad's actually very similar. He's retired, but you wouldn't know it because he's always doing something and always busy. And I'm like, Dad, what's going on? You're supposed to be retired. And he's, I'm painting this, or I'm, building another shed out the back. And if you go to his place, he's got like 3 or 4 sheds out the back. So it's like, do you really need another shed? So I'm going a bit off track here. But yeah, so for Sim, she's got this incredible work ethic. So she would get Jude down at like 6 o'clock at night, or any time that Jude was sleeping, she'd then be in the office working with me.
Yeah, wow.
Doing all the data implementation, looking after our existing clients. So for us, it was just working as a team, tandem, and just trying to get through it together. Because anyone that's got kids, I think, understands that it's teamwork. It's a 2-person job. It's so demanding, especially for the women, whenever they're breastfeeding, and there's a lot that goes into it. So for us, it was just fine, working it out.
Yeah, how good. And I've got some sort of technically questions, like how you assist with clients. And our market is sort of young families who run small businesses, and from a broking perspective, that can actually be pretty challenging at times. But could you give some sort of key things you run through with clients when they're looking for? I'll kind of give a couple of different examples. We'll start with when they're looking to buy their dream home. We'll cover when they're looking to buy an investment property,
Yeah.
And then a lot of what we've had recently is actually, and actually not just recently, but it's more common recently, is buying property through a self-managed super fund.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we kind of run through those three, but we'll start with, what do you talk about or focus on, or how do you structure stuff when it's your dream home?
Yeah. I think it always comes back to a plan, right? So it's starting out and it's going through the numbers and, it's delving into what are they looking to achieve? When are they looking to achieve it? I mean, it's very goals orientated, but it works because then we gain an understanding of, because dream home, I might be sitting there going, well, spending $1 million or whatever it might be, but diving down into what areas are you looking into, what sort of property you're looking for. Is it a house? Is it a unit? We like to help people in sort of every aspect of purchasing a property. So it's not sort of just like, okay, yeah, we'll get you the home loan and happy days. We want to help them, as their particular properties that they're looking at. So we'll give them property reports on it. So it gives them information around what's happening in the market, what's happening in that area, what are properties selling for in that area. And really it comes down to the borrowing capacity side of things. What can they lend based on their incomes? But what are the possibilities in terms of the equity they've got in their existing home? Can we get valuations ordered, which, mind you, doesn't come at a cost to the client? Can we get valuations ordered to see what the equity position is?
Yep.
What we're finding a lot more, especially in the market we're in at the moment, is people have a lot more equity there than they actually think that they do. So there's, your dream home, while you might be thinking is 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even longer term away, is actually happening a lot sooner. And especially with where, the borrowing capacities are at the moment based on, won't probably get too boring about it, but based on, the HEM, so the expenditure measure that the banks put in play, what are the interest rates that they're servicing someone's borrowing capacity on, recent changes coming through that at the moment where they're moving the buffer from 2.5% to 3%, which may affect investors. So it's those sort of things that we look at, but really it's just about structure of, what is the client looking to achieve? And really it's then about setting out a plan, because that could be right away, could be 6 months, could be 12 months, but it's really about what have we got to do to get there.
Yeah, cool. And you've mentioned borrowing capacity as sort of maybe one hurdle, and equity or cash as another. With self-employed, I often get the question, I'll just pay myself a bigger salary. I kind of have that giggle. The banks aren't that silly.
Well, yeah, anyway, we won't go too much into the policy stuff, but there's a few doing some pretty wacky and crazy things. So
yeah, well, that's generally a bit of a not necessarily naughty thing, but the bank sees what's going on and goes, well, you're just shifting one thing from there to there. It's not increasing, but
no, and funny thing there, because sometimes it often is the thought of a client will have, right, is like, I'm only paying myself this, but I'll increase it. But often, as you'd know, we can look at the net profit position of the businesses as well, which can be factored into income. It doesn't necessarily have to be dispersed to you. And some lenders do that better than others. And that that goes into the work that we do behind the scenes, because you might be with XYZ Bank and they don't factor in that stuff. So you probably, and that comes back to dream home investment, borrowing more money. Whereas Joe Blogg's bank down the road, they might actually factor in all these things, which then obviously boosts your borrowing capacity. As you'd know, especially in the self-employed world, like there is some lenders that do it very well. And there's some lenders out there that will strip everything back and make it near impossible for you to borrow anything.
And so some of those great lenders, I know we're getting policy-ish, but those better lenders, what sort of thing do they add back? Because I've heard that adding back. What are some examples of things that come out of the business?
Yeah. So, I mean, depreciation's the big one at the moment, right? Instant asset write-off. So
Yep.
that's the most common thing we're seeing at the moment, where some businesses will be like, well, no, or not businesses, but banks will be like, well, you know what, that's depreciation. And they will have that as an expense. Whereas there's some others that have I guess, a more real approach where they can understand that that's a paper loss to the business, right? It's not a real loss for them. Not to get talking too much accounting, I'll leave that up to you. But there's an ability to then utilize that as cash, as a part of that's money that could have been earned in the business. So depreciation, interest is a really common one. Whenever you're paying it as almost like a sole trader, the super can also be added back in instances. And interest is another one. Sometimes with that interest, actually more times than not with that interest, it's then the fact of having to add back in the liability that might be attached to. But if that liability or lease or chattel mortgage had finished in that previous tax year, well, then that has the ability to then be added back, because it's then a non-recurring expense. So, and there's plenty of lenders out there that all that stuff we just talked about, they won't necessarily factor that stuff in. Yeah. So,
yeah, which actually brings a bit more of a truer cash flow position if you do factor it in. So,
absolutely.
And what are the better lenders doing about things like JobKeeper and cash flow boost from the last 12 months?
Yeah, there's a very small circle, but some will accept it.
As income.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the drive there is potentially around the fact that they understand that there was a change to businesses and the economy within Australia due to COVID-19. So I think for them, it's almost like, well, we understand that there was a little bit of a downturn due to this crazy pandemic. And this is money that the businesses could have earned during that time. So therefore, they're willing to factor this in as a part of your borrowing capacity, which, once again, when we're talking about JobKeeper and cash flow boost, we're not necessarily talking about small income here.
No, for sure.
So it can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. And so that's the sort of dream home stuff. Is there anything else you would sort of add to the conversation if the focus was on buying an investment property?
Yeah. So I think the important stuff which is why the relationship between businesses is so important, and talking to an accountant, is the fact that we can work together, especially from an investment point of view, to make sure that it's going to work within your best interest. So, and once again, it probably comes back to that equity side of things. How do we best utilize that? Also comes, what sort of property that you're buying, whether it's brand new or whether it's established. Like, all these things, when talking to your accountant, form a very important part of what your next steps are. So, and it's finding out about what's the goals, and probably a real common one, lots of investment properties at the moment, but a real common one is the upgrade. Yep. Or even potentially looking to, create the existing property as an investment. Yep. So, and that's factored around the discussions that we're having with our clients as well, is, which is why it's more of a long-term conversation is, hey, is this property going to be forever? Is this going to be an owner-occupied long-term, or is this something that's potentially going to be an investment later on? And then that leads into the discussion about offset, redraw, making sure that you've, got the right, got the right structure in place to make sure that it's going to benefit you long term.
Yep.
So yeah, from an investment point of view, the beauty is it's not necessarily just factored on what your income is now. It's also going to factor in what's going to be happening once you're receiving the rental income as well. So,
yeah, good. There you go. They take that income as well.
Yeah.
Sweet. And then just to add a level of complexity, we do a fair bit of SMSF, or helping clients purchase property through their super.
Yep.
From a lending perspective, could you walk us through, like again, like what are the things to consider? How do they sort of look? How do banks look at servicing? Can you get loans in super? Like all those sort of questions.
It's a funny one, hey, self-managed super fund, because you would think that it would be complex, but it actually has a very simple approach from the bank's point of view, the banks that do it now anyway. So what happened when, there was a big Royal Commission and everything, you found that, especially from the self-managed super fund point of view, a lot of the lenders actually pulled back and said, we're not doing it anymore. What that left was, there's only like a handful of lenders that are doing it. But what that left is the lenders that did it really well. So we were left with, I guess, the cream of the crop, in a sense of like, okay, these lenders that we've got left understand it very well, and it's quite a simple process. So from a lender's point of view, really, in basic terms, what they're looking at is contributions plus potential then rental income, depending on in what capacity you're buying the property, and then outgo versus outgo and loan repayment. So it's quite a simple approach in how they're looking at it, and it's providing that there's a surplus left at the end.
Yep.
Happy days.
Do they look at, let's say you had $1 million in super and you're going to put $500,000 across to purchase the property? I know we're talking big numbers. I just picked them because they're round. But that other $500,000 still ticking away. Let's say it was in shares. Do they look at the dividend income for servicing, or do they not usually?
That's a good question. I think that they would consider it. Like, ultimately, it's probably going to be dependent on what the returns look like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that they would take that approach to it. We would really probably just have to look at, what's then been affected by the cash that's been utilized as well. So, I mean, if that was just sitting in cash, then obviously that's not going to be too much of a drama. But that's probably going to come down to lender preference more than anything.
Okay, fair enough. So servicing, we mainly look at contributions and the rental income. Now, deposit-wise, so let's say we wanted to buy a $500,000 property, looking at a metro area, nothing too rural.
Yep.
This side of Boona. But and like a run-of-the-mill commercial property, sort of 5Ks from a city.
Yep.
What sort of deposit are we looking at if we want to buy $500,000 worth of building?
Yeah. So ballpark. So the crazy thing is, self-managed super funds, is people think that, okay, I need this massive deposit. I'm going to need to put up 50, 60% or 40% cash in order to get it done. But nowadays, like I said, the lenders that are left are doing it very well. So you're probably only really looking at a 20% deposit plus costs.
Yeah, good.
So if you're looking to buy something in the 500 range, you're going to need 100 cash for the deposit, and then maybe around 20 grand for your extras. So I'd say about $120,000.
Wow. And if you've got spouses that have worked for sort of 10 years, they've probably got maybe 60K each in super.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It's surprising. And what there's less of now is that liquidity test at the end as well, which is, I mean, there's still one or two that do it, but nowadays it's sort of like, have you got enough funds to complete the purchase, and maybe a little bit left over at the end for, some rent or, some outgoing stuff. But really it's pretty much, how much do you need to fund it? And as long as you've got that in there, you've got the ability to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. There you go. That's and I get blown away with how simple it is. Just a quick side note, I did do broking for a bit, and one of the things I did a handful of was the self-managed super fund lending, and the forms are like a tenth of the size of getting a home loan. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Like the complexity of the actual transaction from a a trust and accounting and a legal perspective is like hugely more complex. So I
Yeah.
was blown away by that. But yeah, I was just so blown away by how simple the process of going through it is.
I guess we've probably got the fortune maybe as mortgage brokers that everyone else probably is doing the heavy lifting from the self-managed super fund point of view. So make
Yeah,
sure you talk to a good accountant to set one of those up for you as well. So
we can help if that's what you're hinting
yeah,
at.
you can. You can. I know
Uh,
you can.
yeah, awesome. And we're going to sort of round out here. Like, I think, thanks for sharing through the those questions. And is there any sort of closing thing you'd keep in mind with, I guess, the market that's moving pretty quick now? It's hard to get an accepted offer on a property. Any sort of last comments you'd give to people looking to buy a property?
Yep. Yep. Look, it's a pretty crazy market as we know at the moment. So for me, it's about being prepared, which is sitting down and having a game plan. So especially at the moment, because the property market's hot, you're finding that it might be the conditions is the thing that is actually winning, the ability to buy something. So whenever we talk about conditions, we're talking about finance, we're talking about building and pest, we're talking about settlement. So having those things in line and making sure that they're as strong as they can be could be the difference between you buying a property or not. And I know we've had tons of clients that have won properties just based solely on having stronger conditions than somebody else. And the big one at the moment, which you'd see is more prevalent in the market, is auction.
Yeah. Okay.
And buying at auction. So for anyone out there listening, auction probably it's becoming more and more common. And what auction conditions is you're buying the property unconditionally. Oof. So there's no finance terms, there's no building and pest. You're buying the property with the note that you're going to have to settle on it and close on it in anywhere between 30, 45, 60 days in Queensland. Yep. Which this is probably more of a Queensland talk because that's a lot of how it's operated down in New South Wales, Victoria, and in other parts of Australia. You're signing a contract and you're unconditional on it at that point in time anyway. So what I say to people is, and not all mortgage brokers are like this, but I guess for me, I'd like to think that I have a very good understanding of where the market is right now, that your conditions need to be good in order for your offer to be taken seriously. Yep. So being prepared and having a good understanding of, what would be the plan B if things don't quite work out. Yeah. And that's a nervous laugh.
Oh, I'm only laughing because of the purchase that our family made recently. The conditions almost turned the lawyer's face white.
But that's why we knew the plan A, plan B, plan C of that, didn't we? Really. So it's and it's about being prepared. And for me, and it's funny, I was talking to a buyer's agent, sorry to dribble on here, but I was talking to a buyer's agent the other day, and the Gold Coast market, as a lot of people might know, is just one of the hottest markets that's ever been right now. It's ridiculous. And he was saying to me, he said, Cole, I've got clients that I'm looking after. They're working with a mortgage broker. But he's saying to me, yeah, we're going to need 21 days finance, 21 to 28 days finance. And we both looked at each other and had a bit of a giggle because and he said to me, he goes, look, I'm likely not going to be able to find a property for these clients in this market with those terms. Yep. And I said, look, send them my way. Be more than happy to help them out because, conditions are king right now. I know it's usually cash is king, but conditions are king right now in this market. So it's about working with a mortgage broker, making sure your conditions are good. And if you're going to auction, just knowing what the plan B and C is Because really the only thing outstanding is if you do all the legwork for an auction condition is the valuation.
Yeah. Okay.
And once again, that comes back to the property reports and the research that you're doing on the property before you purchase it. But what we're finding at the moment, something's being bought at auction, that's really a true indication of probably where the market is on the property anyway, whenever you've got multiple buyers bidding on a property. So
hard for a valuer. I know they're special people, but it's hard for a valuer to say it's not value when it was at market. So
funny that. Yeah. So no, that's it. That's the advice I have to people right now is and obviously more than happy to help.
Awesome. Yep. And actually, speaking of that, how do we find you?
Find us.
Yeah.
We're prevalent on social media. So it's at Arch Brokerage. You can find Arch Brokerage on Facebook as well, or visit www.archbrokerage.com.au.
Yes.
Or feel free to give me a call, 0499 303 472. So
awesome. All right. And we'll have those links in the old show notes. So feel free. We'll might not put your mobile in there because of the those LA troll websites for phone numbers. But anyway,
get plenty of those calls. Don't worry about that. So
that's it. Well, really good talking with you, Colin. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, and I hope that our listeners have loved hearing both, I guess, your own journey in business and having a young family, but also the topic that you can speak on as an expert. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, mate.